Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our inaugural episode of Sticky Notes Chat. Um, I This is the first of hopefully many bi-weekly episodes. Bi-weekly can mean two things. By this we mean once every other week, not twice a week. That would be just too much. You could have too much of us. It's true. Um, so, so welcome. And thanks for joining us. This week, we're going to be talking about backgrounds. Not backgrounds to videos, but backgrounds to how we got into UX. This is an unusual time. There's lots we could say about lots of the current events that are happening. None of us felt qualified to do that. So we're going to continue with what we feel we can talk about. But we wanted to acknowledge that there is some stuff happening that's less than optimal right now. And we hope that everybody's staying safe out there and staying healthy. So with that in mind, let's continue with this episode. And this week, we wanted to talk about how we got into UX. We hope it will help you. You got to bear in mind, we did this some time ago. So,
hey now.
Oh, all right.
All right.
So times were different, but as you'll find out, they weren't that different in terms of the economy or anything else. So we will talk about us as we go through. Ask questions. Ask questions in the chat on LinkedIn. If you're watching this after the event, you can still ask questions there, or you can just reach out to us. But probably the best place to do it is in the comments for this particular video. That way it all stays in the same place. The other thing I will say is that after the event, we will be putting this recording up on our website, stickynotes.chat. That's going to be the archive for all of these different episodes. The other thing we'll do there is, as we talk through stuff in the session, we'll also try and we'll try and put links to those things on the website, so you've got an opportunity to follow up on the things that we talk about. For this episode, one thing I'll say is that both Cory and I have done some LinkedIn learning videos on getting into UX. That's a great initial resource to use. Other than that, let's just keep going. I want to start. Okay, rather than me talking now, let's move to somebody else. Amanda, how did you get into user experience?
Sure. So I guess maybe it would help if I introduce myself. So hello, I'm Amanda Stockwell. And yeah, I have sort of possibly the most traditional way that I could get into UX, which is that I discovered the Human Factors program at my university during orientation. And the real truth is that I was always looking at engineering school because, grants and loans and things. Scholarships tend to be better for engineering programs than for other programs. But I was always sort of a hesitant engineer. And so I thought that perhaps I would go to engineering school and then find something I actually wanted to do later. And the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society had a table at the orientation with lollipops, and I wanted candy. And then I discovered, I've learned about them and learned what it was. And I was lucky enough to go to a school that had a Human Factors program, which I hadn't even heard of when I was starting to look at college. And then I was lucky enough to have a couple of professors who worked at the Volpe usability lab and did some usability work while I was interning in college. And then I've been in UX pretty much ever since, which is slightly more than a decade. I'll refrain from putting any more details on that statement. But yeah, I've been in UX pretty much since I had any idea what jobs even were. Yeah.
So as part of that, though, I mean, it sounds like you said you had a traditional career but can you think of anything that actually helped you along the way as you were moving towards that career? Was there anything particular that was either a push or something that there was a person who was involved? What was there along those lines?
Yeah, sure. So part of the thing actually is that I didn't know that UX was what I was supposed to be looking for when I was looking for jobs. I just knew that at my internship, I had quite liked participating in usability testing. And by the way, speaking of recessions and downturns and not great things happening, I graduated in 2008. So an awesome time to look for a job and to have no experience. So I'm from Maine originally, and I went home for the summer and was a waitress and applied to jobs for about 4 hours a day every day for about 2 months.
2 months.
Approximately. Yeah.
Man.
I enjoyed like Maine in July, but then around like August, September, I started to be like, oh, I don't want to stay here. Like this is fun for now, but got to move on. So I applied to hundreds of jobs at all kinds of companies all around the world, anywhere. So I basically was just on the internet and searching jobs, entry, usability. And then once I started looking at usability jobs, I found that there were UX things. So then I was like, UX, what's that? And kind of kept looking. So I was very lucky that the first job I got was a UX generalist role at an email marketing company. And that was pretty great because it was a pretty small startup, had a pretty small team. And pretty quickly I got to find out that the part of UX that I liked was the research side of things. And I got to pretty much focus on that. So I feel pretty lucky in that way. And Cory and I have talked about this a lot, is that we are both the kind of people who say yes to things when they pop up. For instance, this live stream or other events or articles or other kind of stuff. So I've been although I've been kind of in the realm of UX and pretty specifically focused on research, I've worked in nearly every iteration of an organization. I've worked in nearly every iteration of a role. I've been an individual contributor. I have been a manager. I have worked in the executive level. I've worked in an agency. I worked at an enterprise. I've worked at a startup. I now run my own thing. So I have experimented with pretty much every kind of UX research role you could have, and have kind of settled into what I think is a sweet spot for me personally, kind of focused on research.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, all three of us are people who decided to go it alone at some point. So, so it's not we're not necessarily completely indicative of the whole population, but we all did start working, applying for jobs, working for companies, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to come back to some of the things you said, Amanda, but I want Cory to have a chance to talk.
Yeah.
Cory, I know it was ages ago, back in the time of the dinosaurs. But how did you get into UX?
It was ages ago, and it was a time when there certainly was no UX. At least no one used the term. I was at University of Maryland as an undergrad in the early '90s, and they said, "Oh, you've got to choose one faculty member to work in their lab." So I said, "Hey, you know what? People are doing different things. What sounds interesting?" And Dr. Norman, Kent Norman, he had taught me a statistics class, and I said, "Hey, you know what? I enjoyed interacting with him then. He's doing this thing called usability of restaurant menus. That sounds cool. I'll do it." And I did it, and I just, wow, this thing is amazing. I love this research. And it was the most exciting part of psychology that I could ever imagine. So, so I went. When I graduated, I said to him, where should I go? What do I do? He's like, oh, I know a guy who might have a job, and I got my first job as a human factors engineer, which sounded funny because today when we talk about human factors, it's something totally different, and certainly engineering tacking that on to UX is a little odd today. In a lot of contexts, some still okay, but that was it. It kind of that informed the rest of my life. My first job was the end of 1994. And from then on, I just, wow, this is amazing, and I've continued to say, wow, this is amazing. As I watched UX kind of build, all around me, and yeah, it was just it's serendipitous.
So you said an interesting thing there. He knew a person who had a job, right? So this is the thing about networking, right? it's not even necessarily your network. It's the network of the people who might be one level removed from you or two levels removed from you. Who do you know who knows somebody who might be able to help you out, right?
Yeah, there was an article. I mean, it was probably a good 5 or 6 years ago. Someone wrote an article and they said, everyone's focused on your close network. Your close. Everyone has a close network, but your close network is teeny tiny. You've got the people that you trust and you're close to. And you know what?
Yeah.
They may know a job, but there's not that many of them. So your odds are smaller. The truth is, what's really valuable is that wider network, the kind of extended network of hundreds, if not thousands of people that we all meet. I mean, you meet people all the time. As long as you can even have that loose connection with them, that you can stay in touch just enough, then really those are the ones that are probably going to find you your next job.
Or you might end up on a live stream with them, like we are with Chris right now. So I've never met Chris in person.
That's true. It's funny. I feel like we know each other because of all the stuff we do that we have in common, and the fact I've watched so many of Amanda's courses. But we've never actually met. We keep on trying to get the LinkedIn guys to get us all in at the same time, so we can do this kind of thing in a studio environment. Have send it out as something that's edited rather than a lot of the time. But yeah, that hasn't happened yet, and it's not going to happen for a while. So we're doing this instead. So networking. I mean, I got my first job in UX. I was working as I trained as a systems analyst. I had a psychology degree. I joined a financial institution who trained me as a systems analyst. Got a job in project management there, a job in doing development work there. And one of my friends who joined at the same time as me was working in this really cool future-looking area. And that group spun off the beginnings of a usability group. And she said, "Hey, you've got a background in psychology, haven't you? You might be interested in this." And if I hadn't had that friend point out this thing to me, I'd never have known that usability existed, because like Cory said, UX didn't exist back then. So yeah, networking. Then while I was working there, somebody from the Microsoft usability group visited our labs, had his business card. He said, "Hey, get in touch." I did. I said, "Got any jobs?" And that's when I moved to the States. Then somebody I worked with at Microsoft had done some work with Jacob Nielsen at his conferences. And I said to him, "Can you introduce me to Jacob?" And that's how I got my next job, working at Nielsen Norman Group. So yeah, all of these things, when I look back at it, I'd love to think it was all about me, but it wasn't. It was all about who I knew. And so mine were all first connections, but I think, first or second, the guy from Microsoft wasn't somebody I knew directly, but I knew him through somebody that I knew. So yeah, all of these things these connections that you make are important. I want to say one thing about that, though. I'm not sure what you two think about this. I'm going to ask you, do you ever get freaked out when people try and connect and you can tell it's just because they want what they think is your lot of connections that they can get into?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, I always invite people to connect with me. But that said, and I even say this on my LinkedIn profile, there's got to be something in common, something.
Right.
And recruiters too. I'm totally open to recruiters connecting, but I've got to see something in common. Just some. I mean, whether it's professional, whether whether just we have people in common that we know, because it is important to at least care about UX. That's kind of my minimum, the criteria if I don't know somebody, but for sure.
Yeah, and I have people connecting to me who don't have careers in UX, but they say, "Hey, I've watched your courses." So that tells me they're interested in UX, right? And either they're just trying to flatter me, but I don't think that's true necessarily. Why flatter me? The other thing is, when people get in touch and say, "Hey, can you recommend me for a job?" The only people I can do that to is people who are my first level contacts that I've actually worked with. I'm not going to recommend somebody I don't know. But I'm happy if you want, part of the thing that helps me understand a person is understanding what their work is. And that's either through stuff that they've posted, stuff that's available for me to see publicly. If I can see that, I'm going to know more about who that person is, and I'm going to be more likely to understand where they're coming from. So if it's just something out of the blue where somebody says, hey, help me find a job, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah,
But
I think there's something too about like genuine connection. So one of the things that the three of us have talked about is that one of the reasons that we all have sort of found our way in various ways into UX is because we're genuinely curious about people, and we care about people, and we're interested in genuine connection. And although that can get sort of tossed around or kind of lost in the mud of trying to get a job, I typically want to help connect the people who I feel are the most connected. And I'm happy to help someone who I feel like is genuinely interested in learning and genuinely interested in connecting.
Right.
But I don't just want to be a conduit for connections or cloud or any of that. Not that I have any to give away per se, but
right. But people believe you do, and that's the same for recruiters too.
Why.
Recruiters, I don't need a job, but I will help you find people for jobs if I feel I can. But I need to know that you know what you're looking for. If you just say, "Oh, I want this person in UX who can do Photoshop," and then they start talking about all the designy things rather than necessarily UXy things, or whatever, they don't know what they want, and I can't help you find something you don't know what you want. You have to be very clear about what you want.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's lots of questions right now about what actually UX is. Perhaps we ought to define what we mean by that. Because
I was trying to find a little segue into it, but thanks, Amanda. So go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, so I'll give my definition. So my definition of user experience is anything that has to do with crafting the way that a person, doesn't matter if they are technically a user or not, but user for purposes of ease of use of terminology, any interaction that a person has with an organization, a product, a brand, etc. And so that's a really wide bucket of things, which means there's a really wide skill set of things. So I like to describe UX as a sort of spectrum of skill sets that all go towards supporting good interactions with something. So that could mean, so that it just so happens that Cory, Chris, and I are on the research and strategy end of the spectrum, which means that we are interested in learning about people, figuring out their context, assessing how well they're doing, and kind of figuring out where to go from there. You might be on the other end of the spectrum where you're more focused on the particulars of how an actual like physical interaction or digital interaction works. You might be worried about things like the colors or the layering of a layout, but all of those components go into building a user experience, and all of those different skill sets and all of those different kinds of roles that support that are what I mean when I say UX, which I understand is confusing. It means a lot of things. That's why there's so much or so little clarity around the world. But I'm sure this will come up a lot more as we talk about people who are getting into UX. But that's why like job definitions and job titles and job roles are so confusing, because there's so many things actually that go into it and go into making a good user experience.
Right. So I'd throw in there, and I like the umbrella. Like I agree, and I kind of put an umbrella on it with all the little skill sets and so on. So not much else to say on my end to say except I agree. However, what I would say is what UX is not in my definition is development. I can say you can develop and you can do UX, but I define UX as an umbrella, and development is not in that umbrella, it's right next to that umbrella. So to the point where UX jobs include, or basically developer jobs with like developing an interface, I don't think that's UX. If it's well, you need to understand the users, you need to research with the users, you need to create interaction designs when you explain why users are doing what they're doing. And this doesn't mean user stories, by the way. It basically, at that point, you can say, yes, I'm doing UX, and then I'm going to code it, and the coding aspect of it is the development aspect. So that's my border. That's my borderline there, which I think not everyone agrees with. Not every job description, because you have the UX UI, where UI, by the way, means two different things. It's either development or it's visual design, depending on where you're coming from. but that's the end of the umbrella as far as I'm concerned.
So that's interesting because I've worked with some great full stack or front end developers who would claim that they're UX people, and I guess the UX purists among us are like, well, they've never had to do the usability studies. They've never had, and there is a difference. There definitely is. I mean, I think anybody who's got that dual skill set is super well qualified. It's a question of, I guess, where do you focus your attention, right? Are you focusing on providing data-driven insights which can create a user experience, or are you focused on turning that into a functioning product?
Yes.
Now, in the middle of that is kind of this interesting gray area because I've done development jobs in the past, but do not please call me a developer. It's not exactly my
Me too.
it's not my forte. As you
Yeah.
can see by the website we put together and stuff like that. I'm also not a designer, as in a visual designer, but yeah, it's good enough. So there's definitely skill sets, and it's where would you say your focus is? And for me, the user experience role is one that's bringing those insights and data-driven insights to the process so that you're building the best possible product you can for the people who'll be using it, whoever they are.
I see, by the way, Sam posted the confusing part. It's seeing HTML and CSS for UX designer roles. I will say that even if HTML and CSS involve coding skills, they are often used as a tool for creating interaction design. Therefore, just because something asked for HTML or CSS doesn't mean that it's a development job per se, even a front-end developer job.
Right.
Not necessarily, and I do think that's a valid skill set for an interaction designer.
And
Yeah,
it's interesting. Oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I was just going to say, we should probably have a whole other episode about job titles and job roles and how almost universally horrible they are.
And then, I mean, we move on to things like there's people asking, what software should I learn? What book should I read? What boot camps should I attend? Then Sahil says, why are people always talking about software when we talk about UX? And that's my attitude. I'm glad somebody said that, because the tools are not what define our trade. 20 years ago, we didn't have the same tools we had today. Some of those tools kind of have evolved over time. Things are easier now than they used to be. Things are more streamlined now than they used to be. But the skill set that we bring to the problems is the same. The tools help us achieve stuff better, faster, more easily, with greater impact. But they're not, which is why it's a bit, I mean, it's nice for recruiters to say, oh, you need certain product skills when they're looking for a UX role. But to be honest, if you see too many of those, or you see ones in a job listing which aren't really UX specific, like they're looking for Photoshop skills for a user researcher role, that's really an indication that there's something wrong about this job. It's nice to be able to demonstrate that you have proficiency in a graphic design tool, in a online research tool, in a I don't know, in all these kinds of software. But if you know one in our industry, you can pretty much learn another one. And you will be, because in 5 years' time, you'll look back on today and you'll say, why were we even using those products back then?
That's what I was going to say. And you can always learn a new tool, right? Like you can learn Sketch or Figma or whatever the latest, newest thing is. But the fundamentals are the same. Focusing on who the person or people are who are going to be using the thing. What do they need? How do you craft something to put it together that serves their needs? And we haven't really mentioned this part yet, but how do you balance that with what the business needs? And we can also have a whole different discussion about that. But I would say that one of the reasons that Chris, Cory, and I are successful in our consulting roles is because we know that there is a balance between what is reasonable and useful for people to use and what will save or earn money for an organization. And ultimately, that's really an important piece for us all to pay attention to as well. And so you can learn a new tool, but you have to know the fundamentals of how to understand people and how to get them what they need.
And this is, I guess, if to riff off of that, I wish I had known that explicitly when I started my career. I would have advanced my career a whole bunch faster if I'd been thinking less tactically about immediate reactions to stuff and thinking more strategically, because there's so many years where user researchers, I don't think it's happening as much now, user researchers would say, why isn't the business listening to us? We've told them all these issues with the software, but they're not making any changes. Yeah. And one of the reasons for that was we weren't talking their language. If you're not talking about how many dollars you're going to be saving an organization by making this change, why would they listen to you? And, top pro tip, if you can put something about how many dollars you've saved on your resume, that's going to have that little eye-opening effect on the people who are trying to employ you.
I would throw in, I saw a post earlier about UX being a new thing. The term is new. We've had the same jobs, the same types of jobs, even though none of us could define our jobs the way we are today. And they've evolved, and they've become more refined, and they've become more fun, and they've become more. And to your point, Chris, about aligning with business, absolutely, like not just being so tactical, makes the job more fun, perhaps, to be able to do that. And I will also add one more thing, is that the moment I realized I as a researcher, I needed to move away, or to release myself from an obligation to make a difference, I can make more of a difference. Because I was like, why aren't they taking my suggestion? Come on, people, listen. And finally, like, forget it. You listen if you want to. I don't care if you don't. But I'm just going to be here. And they're like, oh, we should listen. Yeah. And it's in some ways, I felt like that attitude of, whatever. Help them actually relax a little bit and kind of be a little more receptive.
You're a braver man than me. No, that's kind of true. I mean, these days for me, if a client's going to pay me for a piece of work, of course I care whether they implement some of the recommendations I've made, but they obviously employ me for a reason, because they value my insights. There's other business reasons why some of those things don't get implemented, at least not quite how I expected that they would be, but that's up to them. Ultimately, and you're right, you have to stop caring to a degree, at least in a consultant role.
Well, also it doesn't matter in an in-house role too. I know that I used to work at a place where a very, very common statement was, yeah, but we've always done it this way. And which was torturous to my soul. And ultimately, they eventually slowly made some changes. But I think that's one of those things that contributes to the never-ending imposter syndrome that sometimes people feel, especially when they're newer to UX, or especially UX research. Like, I have all these great insights and nobody's doing anything with them. And to get back to an earlier point, if you are suggesting things that aren't like technically feasible or reasonable for the business, or that don't kind of align with both user needs and business needs, things aren't going to be, they're not going to be implemented. But even if you do find that perfect Venn diagram of would be great for the business, would be awesome for the people, and that's this lovely marriage, stuff happens sometimes. It doesn't mean you didn't do a good job. It doesn't mean your insight wasn't valuable. In fact, sometimes also the best insight is that you shouldn't build anything, or you shouldn't move forward, or that
Don't
feature
fix
you were testing.
what ain't broken.
I just had a real world insight where the client said, this group is our audience. These are the ones for us. And this was a usability study. But as we talked to the people, it went, nope, this group is going to care about your product. All fine and good. So let it go. I know you want to help these people, and you can, but the product you're developing is helping these people, but it's helping them a lot. So do it, and it's insights like that might not be the interface, but it's actually like laying out for the business. You will do good here. You will not necessarily make a difference here, but that's okay. Let it go. Just do what you do and do it well.
So that kind of that moves on to the strategic part of what we do. I mean, we could talk about tools. There's so many questions coming in about tools and about. I think we should probably deal with boot camps and certification another time, because I've got some issues with certification.
That should be a whole hour, I think.
But the strategic side of things is not. Is the side of things that will really differentiate you as an individual. I think it took me so long to work this out, and by that I mean the stuff that you do that's not related to the product directly. The insights that you come up with from user research apply across the organization, and this also marries in with networking. Do you know anybody in the marketing department? I mean, this is the thing, right? It's like, who do you know who can use your data? I don't know if you guys have any examples of times when that's happened for you.
I mean, really, I think that kind of builds into the whole networking thing is whether it's for your job, or whether it's for finding a job or it's for doing your job, it's knowing people, whether it's knowing people in your company who, not your little narrow group, but really kind of, everybody that you possibly can know. You're also going to do your job better. So again, it comes back to that value of networking everywhere, on your job, for your job, in your job.
I always compare usability people or UX people to the Rosetta Stone. We're the ones who can provide the translation between dev speak, business speak, marketing speak, which is its own language, and all those different groups. And because of the roles we can play, should play, being the voice of the user, all those groups need to hear that information, but they also all need to be talking to each other better than they do, and we can be that go-between. I found I was going to say it's easier in a consultant role because you're being, there's this kind of respect you have as you're being brought in to help the organization, and you can kind of demand that certain people turn up in the room.
Oh, in some respects, it's a
but they don't have
double-edged
to listen
sword.
to you. It absolutely is. But there's no harm in building those relationships when you're inside the organization too. I know that that's also helped me learn as a user experience person over the years. That's what marketing does. I thought they just had big budgets and spent it all on parties. They do, but no.
No. And that's a good conversation, I think, consulting versus in-house. It's two different personality types. You're either the go wide or go deep, and not both. But that would be an interesting conversation, I think, for us to have one time.
Yeah, and to circle back to Chris's point about, like, do you know people in other capacities? So I will say that although my first job was a result of my persistence of like unending applications and finding something kind of lucky, essentially since then, every job I've gotten, including just about every consulting gig I've ever had, has been from someone that I knew somehow. I didn't honestly often know them even that well, but maybe I had lunch with them when I worked there, or I met them in a networking event. So I actually happened to help organize Ladies at UX meetup in the city that I live in. And I'm just kind of like, I guess, out and about, or used to be before, when we could leave our houses. No, I mean, I've had clients that were like from the director of marketing from the very first job that I had. I hadn't worked with this person in like 10 years, but they were at a new job where they needed some sort of tangentially related to user research work done. And they reached out to me. And that's happened to me multiple times. So to that point is there's sort of that joke that you can either be good at your job or you can be well liked. It really helps to be both.
If you're a consultant, yes.
There's a balance. But it helps really to be both. But kind of also to that point, like at different organizations that I've worked in, I've sort of placed myself as the person you go to when you have a question about people. And that could have been from the marketing team, that could have been from the product team, that could have been from the dev team, could be from the sales side. I would go and sit with like customer support. Like basically, if you had a question about how people worked, you came to me and I would figure out a way to answer the question. And I think that sort of fundamental component, regardless of the department or team or sort of end customer of my work, was the thing that made it so I could get to where I am now. So I think that's an important piece.
So we've been talking about stuff that is probably slightly nebulous for somebody who's trying to start a career in UX. And I know when we were promoting this episode, we might have given people the slight indication that maybe we were going to tell them exactly how they should be getting a job in UX. I don't want to go into hard skills that we think people should have. But Julianne asked something. She asked, what would you say are the top 3 skills to focus on as a UX professional? I'm not going to talk about hard skills. I think Amanda just mentioned one, which is the kind of networking thing is one of the skills I would probably say is a soft skill. What are the other 2 soft skills? Or Cory, what are your top 3?
Number 1, which is why I have a LinkedIn learning course on this, is empathy. You just need, if you're going to be in UX, you need to have empathy, and you need to develop your empathy, and you need to understanding people is not just a rational exercise, it's an emotional exercise. No matter who the users are, no matter what they're doing, no matter how different it is than what you're doing, you need to feel for them. So that is number 1 on my list as a UX professional. Then I would also say, and I also actually want to add, Chris, when you mentioned about the networking and such, that's on there too, and that's tied into the empathy too. But what I would say also is, that skill is not related to extroversion or introversion. It's an obligation. You might have more fun being out there. You might have less fun being out there, but you can't say I'm an introvert, therefore, networking is not for me.
I think we ought to point out that people are watching 3 introverts on the screen right now, aren't
they? Obviously.
Yeah, but you can't say that. And the component is, it's an obligation to network. It's an obligation to feel empathy, and if you aren't, then figure out how to. And how do you? I mean, if you watch a movie and it's a sad movie, and you feel tearful about it, or you feel excited that the main character, something's happening, you are experiencing empathy for a fictional character. So now they're real characters. They're real people, and yeah, that's what I think.
Amanda, what are your top 3?
So I think that sort of genuine curiosity and empathy for people is incredibly important. But I would add on to that you need to be able to filter your personal views about something from what you learn about people. And so, because I've heard some conversations and seen a lot of discussions happening about, and people hear about this too all the time from different parts of the organization, not in UX, or kind of that faux UX of, well, we know our users, they're just like us. That's not true. It never is. And you have to really be curious about not just what their experience is, but you have to honor that experience and recognize that it's going to be different from yours, and recognize that what might be best for different sorts of user might not be something that you understand. And so that's a piece of it. And then the last thing I'd say is adaptability. I think that we probably could also talk a whole hour about, especially these days, about adapting to circumstances. But things change rapidly all the time. Stuff goes wrong all the time. You have to learn new things all the time in this field. And so being able to be flexible about your approach to things, being pragmatic about how we kind of look at things, I think that's especially important on the research end. So, Chris, I'm curious about your thoughts.
Oh, you want to know what I want to think? So no, it's funny because mine wraps up both of yours, I think. But in the term that I like to use is be a humble apprentice. Okay, and I
Yeah.
use that term when I'm teaching people how to be observers in a user research session. I want you to be a humble apprentice. You're not the expert here. The person who you're watching, who's doing this role, is the expert. I want you to learn from them. Let them feel like you want to be the person that's interested in their role. That's gonna help. You're not necessarily even going to help their role be better in the future, but right now you just want to learn what they do and how they do it. And the humility side of it is important, because if you don't have that, then you're never going to come across as engaging to them. If you're coming in as like, well, I'm from this development group who built this amazing software that you're using, and obviously we want to make it that little bit better. So just tell me about all the awesomeness it has now and how it could be even more awesomer in the future. That's not exactly going to go over very well. But it might. It's not going to get you any interesting insights. Being a humble apprentice in that side of things, and also just in your interactions with the other people that you work with, you can learn from them. Make it clear you want to learn from them, and they'll be much more likely to want to tell you things and want to help you understand their jobs so that you can make their jobs better. So
Yeah.
I mean, all of these things, if I know, again, there's people asking questions about, well, how do I get into this role? How do I convince somebody to employ me? I would say, when I was hiring people, when I was looking at resumes, I was looking for evidence of those soft skills more than I was looking for evidence of aptitude in a particular piece of software. More than I was looking for a certification. More than I was looking for necessarily the exact experiences those people have had. Like Amanda said, I can teach you how to use a piece of software. You can pick it up yourself. It's not that difficult. Most software these days is relatively usable. Even the streaming software we're using, I can kind of make it work. But I would find it difficult to teach you empathy. I would find it difficult to teach you humility. It's something that you have to work on yourself over time. Maybe I can coach you through times where you felt you maybe could have been had more humility, had more empathy, been a better apprentice. But that's up to you. If you can demonstrate that, I will be much more likely to hire you, because it's a lot less work for me. Trying to get those skills into you is much harder than getting a tool skill into you.
100%. I think the other thing is just that willingness to learn, and to be really honest about what you do already know, and to have the initiative to know at least enough about what you know, to figure out the things you don't know and to try to address them, and sort of that willingness to take that on yourself, because it sort of plays into the genuine curiosity about people. Because if you're really passionate about figuring people out and empathetic for them, you'll figure out how to do it, and you'll figure out what that looks like, or you'll figure out a way to talk to people even with no budget or no fancy tools or any of that stuff. So I think that that is another one of those things of, if, again, when I was in a position to be hiring people, I wanted to know that you had done a little bit of research to find out what I was looking for, that you had, I don't know, maybe looked up the company I was working for at the time, seen what kind of work we were doing.
And also I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. And just to wrap up, just to say that, like, to take that little bit of initiative yourself, so that when you're asking for something, and this is true even if whether I had a job opening in particular that you're applying for, if you were just asking me for advice or feedback, if you just send me a generic message that says, I want a job, teach me about UX, I can't do much with that. But if you say, I've looked into it, I've read a bunch of things, I'm really curious about this particular aspect of it, whatever, then it gives me more ability to help out and to find something, even if I couldn't be the one to hire, to help connect you to the right sort of place. So that's kind of two pieces of advice kind of wrapped into one. But I think that initiative is really important.
I'd throw in there about the learning part, and it's not just the learning about the job direction or the potential job, or I mean, and I absolutely agree that's important. It's also just self-improvement learning. What I like to see is people who, I mean, I'm a blog reader myself. I like to read, but whether it's podcast or blogs or videos, or dare I say those LinkedIn learning things we do, or
Product placement.
but really, or books or anything. I want to see people who are always growing, who are always expanding their knowledge, who are staying on top of trends. When I read blogs, it's not just the UX ones. In fact, the most interesting ones are the ones that aren't. For me, it's the business, it's the technology, it's the what's happening in the world. Who are well-rounded. I mean, there's so much there. And it's not just the input, but it's the output. It's the output to branding. It's the people I can Google their name or their name with UX or whatever, and I see stuff. That stuff could be social media. That stuff could be blogs. That stuff could be writing. That stuff could be presence at events. Doesn't
Not
matter.
just stuff, but insightful stuff as well. I mean, if you're just reposting, it kind of shows me what you're interested in. If you put comments on your reposts, it lets me understand that you read it, you understood it, and you had something to say about it. So yeah. I, me and branding don't get on very well together, but I agree with you. It's kind of an important thing if you're trying to find careers. People will be searching for you. They will need to see that you have done something that helps them differentiate you from everybody else who's out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have been going for 45 minutes nonstop. We should give these poor viewers a break. And we didn't get to many of the questions. I'm sorry about that. What I will say is immediately after this, I'll be going through reading the stuff the stuff that's been commented on in this feed. I'll be adding comments to the ones where I feel I can add something. Some of them were questions that I think were tangential to this, and it's given us fodder for. I think we now have enough potential episodes for another, I don't know, 2 years, just from this one session. So we'll really try to address some of this stuff in future episodes. Some of the stuff that you've been asking might be things that we can just put links to on the website afterwards. So definitely what I'd say is after this, give us a couple of days. Our intention is to put the transcript from this up, and also to put resources up for you which might be helpful. So the website is stickynotes.chat. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do so at chat@stickynotes.chat. You can do it through LinkedIn. You can do it through Twitter. You should follow each of us on LinkedIn. No, you must follow each of us on LinkedIn. One thing we will be.
That's why Brody people and him don't get along. So you demand things.
Yeah, maybe I'm doing it wrong. We will be rotating who actually creates these streams as we go through this. So you need to follow all three of us in order for it to actually get notifications when we go live. I know my video has just disappeared. It should be coming back in a second. I'm using a camera that died on me. So, well.
Oh, he disappeared. No.
But you still got my audio, right? So,
yeah. We can still hear you.
And I throw in there that the chat window we have here isn't just static. If you're watching this now or later, please put in what you would like to see. And it's not just kind of like a classic kind of set of how do I get a career, but also what's happening in today's world and how does it relate. There's so much pain and bad stuff and difficulty this year now, the last couple months. But how does that relate to a career? How does that relate to what we're doing as UX professionals? Are we, physically present or not? Are we virtual? What's happening? There's so much there that we can discuss kind of in real time, as it's happening. It's just life in 2020, and UX and specifically UX in 2020. And I'm certainly interested to talk about it and also to hear other people, respond to it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So my camera's dead. Luckily, people can still hear me because, if you couldn't hear my voice, what would be the point? So this is what we're planning on doing next. We want to talk about what it means to be physically present when you're running user research. When is it too early to start running user research in person again? This is going to be an interesting one. It was actually, we bumped this topic up because of something Cory's up to soon. So we will be talking about this one in some detail on the 18th. Follow us on LinkedIn. You can, if you do that, you'll get more notifications about what's going on. Also, if you didn't know this, you can follow hashtags on LinkedIn. Follow this hashtag, and you will get all the information about what we're up to. For this week, I think that's pretty much it. Cory, Amanda, thank you very much. So this was Cory Lebson, Amanda Stockwell, and me, Chris Nodder. We've really enjoyed hosting this, I think. It's been quite a fun event. I just feel bad that I haven't been able to answer everybody's questions, but we will get to some of those along the way with the different broadcasts, and we'll be going through the comments live. And if you're watching this after the event, we'll be going through the comments over the next couple of weeks too, just to see what else people have to say. So thanks so much, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Bye.